Life can be strange and sometimes ends in almost unbelievable ways. In this video, we'll look at 5 more real stories of people who died in extremely ironic ways. These tales show how unexpected and ironic life can be, and remind us that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. It was December 8, 2015, in Patagonia, Chile. Douglas Tompkins, the 72-year-old founder of the North Face, was kayaking on General Carrera Lake. This massive lake spans 1,150 square miles and is known for its breathtaking scenery and dangerous waters. It is also infamous for sudden storms caused by unpredictable weather and strong winds. Tompkins, an outdoor enthusiast, had built a career around his love for nature. From rock climbing as a teenager to creating one of the most iconic outdoor gear brands, his connection to the wilderness was undeniable. In later years, he became a devoted environmentalist, purchasing large tracts of land in Chile and Argentina to protect Patagonia's beauty. These lands became conservation parks, a legacy of his efforts to safeguard nature. On this particular day, Tompkins was kayaking with 5 others. A sudden storm swept over the lake as they paddled, turning calm waters into towering waves up to 3 meters high. The group struggled against the storm but couldn't maintain control. All 6 kayaks overturned, throwing the kayakers into the freezing water. The lake's temperature rarely exceeds 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and cold water like this can cause hypothermia within minutes. Struggling in the icy waters, 3 kayakers managed to swim to a small island, but Tompkins and 2 others remained in the lake, unable to reach safety. Tompkins, who had spent his life advocating for outdoor safety and designing gear to protect people in extreme conditions, now found himself vulnerable to the elements. Despite having the knowledge and equipment to face such situations, the extreme cold took its toll. Emergency responders acted quickly. A military patrol boat and a helicopter were dispatched to rescue the stranded group. 3 kayakers were pulled from the water by boat, while Tompkins and the others were airlifted to the nearest hospital in Coyhaique, about 1,000 miles south of Santiago. By the time Tompkins arrived, his body temperature had dropped to 19 degrees Celsius, or 66 degrees Fahrenheit, far below what the human body can survive. Medical staff worked tirelessly to warm him, but his condition was critical. Despite their efforts, Tompkins passed away at 6:30 p.m., a victim of severe hypothermia. His death profoundly affected his family and the global outdoor and environmental communities. Tompkins' passing sparked tributes from around the world. The North Face, the company he co-founded in 1966, called him a passionate environmental advocate. His work in conservation and his commitment to protecting natural landscapes were praised widely. His death, however, carried a deep irony. Despite his lifelong dedication to mastering and protecting the outdoors, nature proved more powerful than any preparation. Born in 1943 in Ohio and raised in Millbrook, New York, Tompkins showed an early love for the outdoors. By his teens, he was rock climbing in the Shawangunk Mountains. At 17, he left prep school and moved west, skiing and climbing in Colorado and California. His passion for wilderness set the course for his future. 1966, Tompkins co-founded the North Face, initially catering to serious skiers and climbers. The company grew into a global outdoor gear brand, but by 1969 he sold his share and pursued new ventures. He co-founded Esprit, a multinational clothing company, alongside his first wife, Susie Russell. However, after their divorce in 1989, Tompkins left the fashion industry, disillusioned by its role in environmental harm. From then on, he dedicated his life to conservation. In the 1990s, Tompkins moved to Chile and began buying land in Patagonia to protect it from industrial development. In 1991, he founded Pumalin Park, a 716 606-acre reserve stretching from the Andes to the Pacific. Working with his second wife, Christine Tompkins, former CEO of the Patagonia clothing brand, he expanded these efforts, turning vast areas into protected lands. Though some Chilean politicians accused Tompkins of land grabbing, many viewed him as a visionary who used his wealth to preserve nature. His dedication to protecting Patagonia's landscapes inspired conservationists worldwide. At his death, Tompkins had secured millions of acres of land for conservation, ensuring their protection for future generations. While his loss was devastating, his work left a lasting impact on the environmental movement. Tompkins spent his life advocating for the natural world, and though his final moments were shaped by the wilderness he loved, his legacy continues in the lands he preserved. Kurt Gödel, born in 1906 in Brunn, Austria-Hungary, now Brno, Czech Republic, is remembered as one of the most influential mathematicians and logicians of the 20th century. His groundbreaking incompleteness theorems changed the way we understand mathematical systems. Yet despite his brilliance, Gödel's life was overshadowed by severe paranoia and mental health struggles, which eventually led to his tragic death. Gödel's early life was marked by illness. At the age of 6, he suffered from rheumatic fever. Although he recovered, Gödel believed this illness permanently affected his health, fueling lifelong anxiety and a preoccupation with his physical well-being. Over the years, he experienced several nervous breakdowns requiring hospitalization. Despite these challenges, Gödel's intellectual achievements were remarkable. He studied at the University of Vienna during the 1920s when the city was a hub for intellectual thought. He became a key member of the Vienna Circle, a group focused on logic and mathematics. Under the mentorship of Hans Hahn, Gödel completed his doctorate in 1929 at the age of 23. His work revealed that formal mathematical systems were inherently incomplete, no matter how rigorous, a revolutionary concept that recognized him worldwide. In 1931, Gödel published his incompleteness theorems. His first theorem showed that any consistent mathematical system contains truths that cannot be proven within the system itself. The second proved that such systems could not confirm their consistency. This shattered the prevailing belief that all mathematical truths could be derived from basic axioms, securing Gödel's legacy. As his academic reputation grew, Gödel's mental health declined. The political turmoil of the 1930s, including the annexation of Austria by Nazi Germany, deeply unsettled him. Fearing for his safety and the possibility of being drafted into the German military, Gödel fled Austria in 1940 with his wife Adele Nimberski. The couple settled in the United States, where Gödel secured a position at Princeton University with the help of Albert Einstein, with whom he formed a close friendship. Gödel thrived professionally at Princeton's Institute for Advanced Study, but his personal life was plagued by growing paranoia. The 1936 death of his mentor, Moritz Schlick, who was killed by one of his students, intensified Gödel's fears of being targeted. He became convinced that someone was trying to harm him through poisoning. This fear grew so intense that he would only eat food prepared and tasted by Adele, who supported him through his struggles. As the years passed, Gödel's mental health worsened. He began experiencing hallucinations and developed an irrational distrust of those around him. By the late 1960s, his paranoia extended to friends and colleagues. Despite his continued contributions to mathematics and logic, his deteriorating mental state overshadowed his achievements. In 1977, Adele fell seriously ill and was hospitalized for 6 months. During her absence, Gödel refused to eat, convinced that any food not prepared by Adele was unsafe. His refusal to eat led to severe malnutrition. By the time Adele returned, Gödel's condition was critical. He passed away on January 14, 1978, weighing just 65 pounds. The official cause of death was malnutrition, brought on by his extreme fear of being harmed. Gödel's tragic death reveals how mental health struggles can deeply impact even the most brilliant individuals. His paranoia not only overshadowed his genius, but also ultimately led to his demise. While his groundbreaking work in mathematics and logic remains celebrated, his story is a reminder of the importance of addressing mental health challenges. What if Gödel had sought help earlier in life? Could his fears have been managed, allowing him to live a longer and more fulfilling life? His story raises important questions about how society recognizes and supports individuals dealing with mental health issues. Even the brightest minds are not immune to such struggles. Gödel's legacy is unmatched intellectual achievement paired with profound personal hardship. His story continues to resonate, reminding us of the balance between brilliance and the human condition. It was September 26, 2010, in Boston Spa, a small West Yorkshire, England village. Jimmy Heselden, a 62-year-old businessman and philanthropist, was riding a Segway X2. This rugged off-road model designed to handle uneven terrain was part of the product line of Segway Incorporated, the company he owned. Heselden had recently acquired the company and hoped to revive its fortunes after its initial buzz in the early 2000s had faded. Heselden was riding along a narrow bridleway near the river wharf. The path was uneven with tree roots and ruts, and ran above a steep drop into the river. While riding, Heselden encountered Sean Christie, who was walking his dog. To make room for Christie to pass, Heselden reversed his Segway. The uneven ground made balancing difficult, and the Segway slipped, sending Heselden over the edge. He fell approximately 42 feet into the river below. Christie rushed to help and found Heselden unresponsive in the water. Emergency services were called, but by the time they arrived, it was clear Heselden had passed away. Investigators determined there was no malfunction with the Segway, and the coroner ruled the death an accident caused by the fall. The incident was a tragic result of an act of courtesy and the difficult terrain. Heselden's death was particularly ironic because it involved the very product he was trying to promote. Known as one of the wealthiest men in the UK, he had built his fortune through Hesco Bastion. This company manufactures collapsible wire mesh containers for protective barriers in military zones. Despite his wealth, Heselden remained grounded, often giving generously to charity. He donated millions to local causes, including £10 million to the Leeds Community Foundation. The Segway was intended to revolutionize personal transport, but struggled to gain widespread acceptance. While it was designed to be safe, questions arose about its suitability for rough terrain. However, the investigation confirmed that the Segway was functioning properly and that the accident was caused by the challenging conditions and Heselden's movement on the path. After Heselden's passing, Segway Incorporated faced an uncertain future. In 2013, it was sold to Roger Brown, who aimed to make the product more accessible by reducing costs and redesigning its features. Segway later gained modest success in the ride-sharing industry, with companies like Bird and Lime using it for urban transportation. In 2015, Ninebot acquired Segway, helping improve its profitability by adapting the brand to meet new market demands. Despite these efforts, the original Segway was discontinued in 2020. The company shifted its focus to electric bikes, scooters, and other technologies, leaving behind the ambitious invention that promised to change how people moved. Heselden's death sparked discussions about safety and the limitations of technology. His legacy as a philanthropist and successful entrepreneur remains significant, but his tragic accident while riding the Segway tells us about the unpredictability of life. It was June 5, 2014, in Novato, California, when the Moylan family faced an unimaginable loss. Sean Moylan, a 27-year-old known for his kindness and wit, lost his life after falling from the Golden Gate Bridge. His death carried an even deeper resonance as his grandfather, John Moylan, had long fought to make the bridge safer by advocating for barriers to prevent such tragedies. John Moylan was a well-known figure in San Francisco and was celebrated for his dedication to public safety and community service. Born in Ireland, he immigrated to the United States in 1951 and devoted much of his life to union leadership and improving lives. As a board member of the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District, he spearheaded efforts to install a barrier on the bridge to prevent deaths. His mission became personal after losing a grandnephew under similar circumstances, strengthening his resolve to address this issue. After years of debate, the board approved a barrier plan in 2008. However, progress was slow, and construction wasn't completed for years. Tragically, despite John's tireless advocacy, his grandson Sean became one of the individuals the barrier might have saved. Sean had faced significant emotional challenges for years, despite being seen by many as a bright and caring individual. Earlier in 2014, he survived a life-threatening accident in Eugene, Oregon, when he stepped in front of a moving truck. Evidence suggested it was an intentional act. Though he recovered physically, his emotional pain lingered. Family members, including John, spent time with Sean after the incident, believing he was healing. Just days before his passing, Sean appeared upbeat, joking, and enjoying a meal with his family. On the afternoon of June 5th, Sean went to the Golden Gate Bridge. At around 4:22 p.m., the Coast Guard recovered his body from the waters below, confirming the tragic loss. For John, the heartbreak was profound, as he had spent years fighting for the safety of others on the bridge, only to lose his grandson there. In interviews following Sean's death, John spoke candidly about his grandson's struggles. He described Sean as a generous and good-natured young man who had battled inner pain. Refusing to place blame on the bridge or anyone else, John acknowledged the complexity of his grandson's struggles. He had a problem, and that's it, John said, emphasizing that no single factor was responsible for what happened. Despite his grief, John remained committed to his mission. Just weeks after Sean's death, the Golden Gate Bridge Board was set to meet and finalize funding for a $68 million project to install a safety net under the bridge. This initiative was bittersweet for John. He had fought for it for years, yet it came too late to save Sean. Since its opening in 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge has become a site of despair for many, with over 1,500 lives lost there. On average, dozens of people attempt to take their lives at the bridge each year. John's work was a reminder that while barriers might help, broader solutions were needed to address mental health struggles. Even as he mourned his grandson, he remained determined to advocate for these changes. The Golden Gate Bridge's safety barrier faced significant opposition over the years. Critics raised concerns about its cost, aesthetics, and potential impact on tourism. yet John persisted, believing every life saved was worth the effort. Under his leadership, the project eventually gained approval, and construction began, though it would take years to complete. Sean's passing underscored the ongoing challenges of mental health and prevention. While the safety barrier represented progress, John acknowledged it wouldn't stop every tragedy. For him, it was part of a larger fight against an issue that affects countless families. "This is an epidemic," John said, hoping continued efforts could bring change. John Moylan's tireless advocacy left an enduring legacy on the Golden Gate Bridge, transforming it into a symbol of hope for countless lives. Sean's heartbreaking story is a powerful call to action, urging compassion and awareness for struggles often hidden in silence. Through his grief, John's unwavering dedication to preventing future tragedies is an inspiring testament to resilience and the power of change. It was July 28, 1980, when 32-year-old Troy Leon Gregg escaped from Georgia State Prison. He was on death row for a double homicide and armed robbery in 1973. That night, Gregg and inmates Timothy McCorquodale, Johnny L. Johnson, and David Jarrell carried out an audacious escape plan. They sawed through cell bars, climbed ledges, and disguised themselves in stolen prison guard uniforms. Their plan worked, and they passed through several security checks unnoticed. This marked the first successful death row escape in Georgia's history. Once outside, they reached a car parked by a relative of one of the inmates. For a brief moment, they tasted freedom. However, Gregg's escape took a tragic turn before the night ended. Gregg's story began in 1973 when he was 25. While hitchhiking through Florida with 16-year-old Floyd Allen, they were picked up by Fred Simmons and Bob Moore. Simmons' car broke down during their journey, and he purchased another vehicle with his own money. Hours later, events spiraled into violence. Gregg claimed Simmons attacked him during an argument, forcing him to act in self-defense. He said he shot Simmons and Moore to protect himself. Allen, however, told a different story. He testified that Gregg had planned to rob the men and had confided this plan to him. According to Allen, Gregg shot Simmons and Moore, then ensured they were no longer alive before taking their belongings and stealing the car. They drove off but were eventually caught when a previous companion, Dennis Weaver, recognized the victims in a newspaper and alerted authorities. Gregg was arrested with a .25 caliber handgun and later convicted of robbery and the deaths of Simmons and Moore, receiving a death sentence. Gregg's trial became significant in U.S. legal history. His case was among the first to uphold a death sentence after the Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976 following the Furman v. Georgia decision. Gregg's case introduced a two-phase trial system to ensure fairness in sentencing. Despite his conviction, Gregg never stopped planning his escape. On the night of July 28, 1980, he and the other inmates carried out their plan. They exited their cells, reached a fire escape, and walked past guards disguised as staff members. Afterward, Gregg called a local newspaper, the Albany Herald, to complain about prison conditions. This call tipped off officials about his escape. By nightfall, Gregg found himself in a North Carolina bar. Accounts of what happened next vary. One version suggests Gregg, under the influence of alcohol, confronted a waitress, leading to an altercation with a biker who defended her. The confrontation escalated and Gregg was fatally beaten. Another version claims that his fellow escapees turned on him, accusing him of betraying them by revealing their escape plan. They allegedly attacked him in a fit of anger. Regardless of the details, Gregg's body was later found in the Catawba River. His cause of death was determined to be suffocation caused by swelling from severe injuries. Meanwhile, the remaining escapees didn't get far. Within 3 days, McCorquodale, Johnson, and Jarrell were captured in an abandoned house. Though McCorquodale and another man, James Cecil Horn, were initially charged in connection with Gregg's death, the charges were later dropped due to insufficient evidence. The exact circumstances of Gregg's death remain unresolved. Troy Leon Gregg's escape ended mere hours after it began, with his death under mysterious and violent circumstances. He had spent years on death row, and his brief taste of freedom was cut short by events eerily similar to the crimes that had landed him there. Gregg's story leaves many unanswered questions. What if he had successfully escaped? Could he have started a new life? Or would his past eventually catch up? What if his fellow escapees had remained united? Or if they had all evaded capture? Such questions linger, but the one certainty is that Gregg's story exemplifies how actions often have unavoidable consequences, no matter how far in the past. His life and death remain tied to the history of the death penalty in the United States, a haunting reminder of justice, fate, and the irony of his final hours.